Hello and welcome to this week's episode of #Leadership What's on Your Mind. Remember, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe on your podcast provider or hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Every Wednesday at 6 a.m. we have an amazing guest coming and sharing their experiences, their expertise and their leadership stories. So today we have John Stephenson. How are you, sir?
Very well, Stuart. It's fantastic that you've invited us on today. It's been a long time coming.
It has. We tried to do this a couple of months ago, didn't we? But for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And I'm so pleased and so happy. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because I'll just give you a little bit of flavor. We met ex-military, like out of the military, and very much similar paths. And since we met on LinkedIn and the good old social media nowadays, every sort of 4 to 6 months, we have a real good chat, don't we? And I don't know how we're going to get this into 20 minutes. So without further ado, as I hit the 20-minute timer, Joy, could you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you've done previously and what you're now doing now?
Yeah, well, my name is John Stephenson. And basically, I joined the military slightly late. And had a fantastic career. Well, I believe I had a fantastic career in the Royal Signals, in which I loved. But there came a time when I had to leave. I was an RCMO when I left, a career manager. Previous to that, I was an RSM. So in my eyes, I'd made it. And then it became a little bit of a struggle with postings. You know, you get towards the top of the pyramid, if you like. And it was very difficult getting somewhere where I lived. So I decided that was time to go. And this is where I am now. And I struggled for a couple of years when I left the military. I've been out nearly 4.5 years now. And for 2 years, mentally, it wasn't a great place to be, simply because I just didn't understand the end. And thus, with that experience behind me and that military experience, I set up the Forces Transition Group alongside a couple of other people who are kind of, I suppose, silent partners in the background to give me the ability to do this. And we've gone from strength to strength over the last 2.5 years. The Forces Transition Group is a handrail, really. And hopefully it is going to be the exit strategy of every single person that leaves the armed forces in the future. And that's where I want to be. Leave a legacy is kind of what it's all about. And to create the exit strategy of everybody and make it perfect, wouldn't that be a fine thing? And that's where I'm
amazing. Yeah, and do you know what? I was going to pick up on that because you're so giving of your time and wanting to help others. I'm really pleased to get you on because we're going to focus on you and get your experience and your journey because you're so good at helping others and giving your time and the ethos and the values behind the business. Is no wonder when I saw what you were doing, I knew it was different and I could see what you were trying to achieve, which was really kind of compelling. So we asked 2 questions. We're going to start with the first one before we forget. We're obviously #leadership. What's on your mind? What comes to your mind when you hear the word leadership?
Leadership, it's a massively tricky one, and it's something in the military you believe you're doing, but perhaps we're not. Perhaps we're managing and not leading. It all started in the very early days for me. When I was young, I had an amazing, upbringing. Brilliant parents, 2 great sisters, all that kind of stuff is all amazing. But me personally, I was quite a weak, small individual, in my eyes anyway. To a certain extent, probably bullied quite a lot. And I never really had the opportunity to experience being a leader at an early age. You know, I was probably not the school captain at football, although I played football. I was in the background. I was pretty much a grey young person, and I came from a family that was really loving, all that kind of stuff. And my father did very well in the fire brigade, and he was a leader in my eyes. I did everything for him, and I kind of thought, I'm not really probably what he wants. Of course, that's not true, but I needed to find a way of coming out of that. And so for the first couple of years after school, I kind of worked in jobs in retail and things like that. And one day I just ended up in the careers office, and 2 days later I was in Basinville. Now, as I went through my military career, as I begun, I continued to be that great person. I was quite scared of everything or anything. I kind of got through basic training. I was Mr. Average. I didn't want to see myself as a leader, nor did I want to be the bottom person. So I kept myself fit, kept myself quiet, and I got through. But I always wanted to be that leader. And slowly but surely I become better. I started to develop. I got bigger. And I was small when I joined the military, and I just grew in confidence a little bit. And as I started to make my way, and under the military guidance and some great leaders, I guess, that were in charge of me, I started to progress, and over time found the confidence to understand a little bit more about how a person should be, how we could perhaps lead.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with my military career is I don't think on many occasions I was a leader. I think probably at the time I believed I was, but when I look back at my military career and I look back at everybody around me, I don't think many people are leading at all. I think perhaps in the military, leading is on the battlefield, you know, infantry, front line, that kind of stuff. Sure, there's lots of leadership going on there. But when we're on barracks and when we're doing normal things, we're probably just managing. And we get confused with the two. So when I look back on that part, can I find any times when I really led? I don't think I can. So actually I got to mid-40s and I still hadn't really been a leader. I probably had been a decent manager. Okay, I can deal with that. And then of course I left the military and became a little bit within myself again. And I kind of went back to when I was younger. I was quite negative. I didn't really understand what was going on. And I struggled. I really struggled going back to what I spoke about when we opened up your podcast. But then my concept of starting up the Forces Transition Group was heard by somebody I didn't even know, who gave me the ability to do it and fund it. And this is why I think now somehow I've found where leadership is, because now I've got the ability to actually give something to people, knowledge, passion, my enthusiasm for this, and actually give them this handrail of these fundamentals that you actually need for when you leave as early as I can, which changes our life. And I think that's what leadership is to me, because I can give back and draw on my experience to give them that, whereas I don't think I've ever done that in the whole of my life. So the last 2 years have been quite special.
Yeah, amazing. I think you covered both questions in one there, because usually we ask, like, I'm going to ask it anyway, actually, because I think it'd be interesting to see whether there are any similarities or transferable things from the foundations, if you like, and I'll explain why. So we ask people, obviously, focusing on you, where do you think your leadership journey started? And obviously you've alluded to it was just recently with the business. Are there anything that you can go back to, however far back, that has built the leader that you now find yourself to have grown to?
I suppose if I go all the way back to the beginning, and what I wanted to be was my dad. And I used to watch how he led, not particularly in the fire brigade, but maybe on the football pitch, because my dad was a really good footballer. And that's what I wanted to be. But because I was weak, I was small, it didn't really happen. I suppose the only time during my military career that maybe I have got the leadership bug or understood what it really was to do with sport. But it's a different kind of leadership in many ways.
Yeah.
But I was aided in that by people around me. I had some really good, solid friends who I don't believe if they were not, or I believe if they weren't there, I would have struggled to achieve. So if we look at simple things in the military, like Army, the Army Cup football, it's the biggest thing you can win within Army football. And I won that 5 times, but I didn't win that because I was a leader. I was the captain of the team on 4 occasions. But I won it because of all the people around me, and they just allowed me to win it as the captain. It wasn't because I was like, right, let's go. I'm at the front and I'm pulling you up. Everyone was just brilliant at what they did, and they allowed me to do that. Whether I should have been the captain's another question. Probably
that's
not,
an interesting one. Let me pick you up on that. Obviously, to be a captain of that 4 times, that doesn't just happen. And what you've alluded to there would be that you would expect a captain of a football team to have that success within the armed forces, within the army, to have that. I'm just going to put this stereotypical leader in people's heads there. You obviously don't fit into that category of stereotypical extrovert, shouting, telling. So why do you think you got that role?
Well, I was never going to be stood there shouting. But what I did do is I was good at what I did. And as I got further on in my footballing career, I was always good. It was every single game I would score, perhaps. And maybe that's how I led, by making sure that we won, and did it in all different ways. And there's all different ways you can do that kind of thing on the football field. You know, my opinion about sport, when it's at that level, is you can't lose. It doesn't matter how you win. And if you're bad at winning, you play badly, what matters is the score at the end. And how you get there is important, because at the highest level, it isn't always about just being the best. It's not always about just, you know, being amazing at it. You just got to win. And however you
grinding
do
out
that,
those results you hear sometimes, don't you?
and I think I was good at that.
Yeah,
but I wasn't at the front screaming and shouting.
Yeah, kind of. It comes up quite often when you talk about the militariness of leadership. And you just mentioned then about the link to what you just said with the football, about find a way to make it happen, and find a way to problem solve, and this has to happen. And I don't see that as much in the corporate world. It's very much part of the militariness, isn't it, of make it happen. Like, you need to problem solve quickly, and that's the skill set a lot of people have, isn't it?
It is, and that's one of the things that we're trying to make relatable. It's why I want to work within service people, not just at the end, because I believe there's a big problem at the end. There's an issue. You know, we've got lots of great things out there, CTP, CTW, all these great people helping, but the end's never been solved, ever. So there is something to be said about, do we solve it at the beginning? And if you think about that, you're creating a professional who understands the future from day one, rather than somebody who just leaves it till the end because there's a program there.
Yeah. And
that's, in effect, what I'd love to do. At the minute, we can't do that because we're not allowed to do that.
Yeah. And you know what, I as you just said that, I thought about something I've not thought about before. Obviously, if you do not go into the military, you maybe have the mindset and the passion and the drive to see throughout your career. Only somebody recently we've been on the podcast talking about an unusual career. They went quite high first, and then they've sort of been lower down in position wise, but quite like the fact that they've got a diverse career now. But the stereotypical stepping up the ladder, when you go into the military, yes, you step up the ladder within the military, but it is, as I always say, a military bubble, and you exit. And it's a bit like, wow, like I've not had to think or act or behave or have this worry, concern, like where do I fit? That's where it kind of happens, isn't it? Like the realization of what's next.
The things that go on in your head that you just don't understand, there's nothing wrong with that. It seems to be normal. The thousands of people I've spoke to in the last few years have all had the same issue, and at different levels. But something definitely happens there where it takes a period of time to find, I suppose, stability. And one of the things that we want to work towards is creating that stability at the end. Because when somebody's leaving, we know this is going to happen. So if you create instability, then these problems are compounded. They start to come out in all different other areas, because you're mentally not stable, and you're doing something you probably don't like. But if you come out and you get everybody the perfect exit strategy, or as near as to it, then that stability is there. So all these problems that you have, all these things that you're feeling, you can cope with them because it's just easier.
Yeah.
And that's the problem I had. So for 2 years, I was unstable. You know, not in a bad way, but I just didn't like anything I did. So I couldn't get my head around what I'd just done. Why had I left? This world is just different and I don't like it. And it hasn't been until the last 2 years, 2.5 years, in which I've realized it's a great place to be. And I found my place a little bit now. And that being said, I still get that feeling that something is just not right. What am I actually doing? Is this going to work? It's totally different. And trying to get rid of the chimp off the shoulder when that happens has to happen quicker for me now, because the longer it stays on my shoulder, it affects more things. And I've learned to kind of try and use that as a strength now.
Yeah. Also, again, kind of like what I loved when I came across you initially was I was on that fast forward of like, the way I'm going to go through this, especially the last 2 years, we know what the global situation has been, is about connecting with people and the power. And an ex-colleague of mine said a few years before I left, they'd left prior to me, and said it's all about not who you know, as in it's all about connections, finding the right people who will share their stories, give you advice, open doors, and that's where we connected, wasn't it? And I know that's so important to pass that forwards to especially military veterans and military personnel, but also lots of everybody. It's a big thing, connecting and speaking to people.
Oh, well, one thing that you lose when you join the military, probably not because the military want you to, but it's emotion. And emotion is what will always connect you with people. Because once people feel that connection with you, and actually you actually feel something, and you actually mean it, you care, that's when you win. And I found that since I've left and I've been working, through the Forces Transition Group, that's the #1 attribute. Because the minute you relate to somebody and they buy into you, you will win every single day of the week, and they will listen to what you're saying. And if you've got a good system in place that's going to create positivity, and then they listen, then they'll move forward. And that's what we've created.
Yeah, amazing. So we've got 4 minutes left. So people listening to this are wanting to level up their leadership journey. And I said before we jumped on that it'd be really interesting to learn a little bit about what's working now. Like you said, you're in your perspective, you're in a leadership position now. So what would you pass forward and advise people to start thinking about with your experience of people management and people leadership, and how you lead yourself and others forwards?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. The main thing I believe you need to understand is yourself. What are you actually really passing to people? What are you actually doing that inspires? What are you actually doing that means something to people? But if you understand yourself, you'll get it. And I think if I talk on that military side, still, people in the military don't really know who they are because they've been given something that isn't actually them. And what I mean by that is their values and standards. So they live by something that perhaps isn't them. But once you understand what your own values and standards are, you can move forward, and then you can lead properly. And you should also understand how people feel. You should always receive feedback in the right way, because you might think you're leading, you might think you're doing the right thing all of the time, but if you don't listen to what they're saying, then you will never ever get it right, and you'll never get that 360 that you really need. And that's really important. And something I struggled with when I left was feedback. And I've been learning and taking that criticism, if you want to call it that, and trying to use it positively, because I used to use it as a negative. And it used to really grind me down, but now I don't really feel as much, and it doesn't affect me as much like that now.
I don't know whether this is relatable, but I remember when building what I've built now, a few times being in front of people that really gave me a dressing down in the nicest possible way. Yeah. Like, I thought I had it sorted, and they're like, who's your ideal client? Who are you marketing to? What are you doing? And I came out battered and bruised. And you're right, it was brutal feedback. But now I almost look for that, because I know that's the best way of driving myself and businesses and the podcast forwards.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I receive criticism all the time. but I just deal with it with my answer better now.
Mm.
And then I take it on board. You know, the same thing works on the other way though. You really struggle, and you will struggle with this when people say nice things. It's very hard to receive something when someone says, "You're good at this, you know." You're like, "Oh, yeah, of course I am, yeah." But actually, you should take some of that feedback when it's good as well as it's bad, because that can drive how you lead as well and how much influence you're going to have on people. But when you're influencing people, it always has to be in a positive way, because we've both been around in areas that it can become negative. And the negative people, if they're big enough, will create a huge negative drive.
Yeah. So tell just quickly in the last minute, I want to tell us a little bit. We're only in February, a couple of months into the year. What's 2022 got planned for yourself? What's going on? Because I know it's really exciting, and we're going to catch up after this for all the details. But tell us what's going on.
Well, the FTG is going to continue being personable. It's going to continue being one-to-one. That's why what wins. It has to be about each and every single individual that comes through, and making sure that that person's looked after at whatever level. Some people are totally happy to do an hour and that's it. Some people need 10. That's just the way it is. People learn, people understand quicker, slower, all that kind of stuff. But on top of all that, we've got lots of different things in the job acceleration through into Civilian Street, using brilliant organizations with brilliant people and just getting them talking together. And we've got lots of job fairs. We've got a new micro site coming up. We've got sponsorships. We've got exclusive job fairs for individual businesses that will attract a big audience. And we've got a website in which we'll be able to hold lots of jobs on. It's all just beginning to happen. It takes time, as you know, to build your own business. And the biggest problem I had is I was going too fast. Now when I scale that back in and I really understand what I'm doing, removing fear, that's what's making it kind of drive forward. And
brilliant.
I'm really excited for 2022, and actually I'm excited for service leavers, because this is really, really making a difference.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. So we're going to have all your links and your connections below, because I know there's going to be a lot of ex-military, or there's lots of people that know ex-military who will be listening to this as well, to pass that forwards. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for your time, John. If you enjoyed that, make sure you tell us what your takeaways were from each of the episodes. Make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. Make sure you follow us on your podcast provider. And like ever, every Wednesday at 6 a.m, I've got another amazing guest coming and sharing their stories and their expertise. Thank you again, John.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
I'll see you all next week, guys. Take care. Bye.